Hey friends. Um, I'm leaning into this background because I never realized how much our bedroom wall looked like a photography studio portrait backdrop. I don't know how I have missed this for so long, but clearly this is more interesting than the white wall in my office with like some really shady looking light coming through the window. So I'm leaning into this. Um, and I had a really great conversation with a couple of students today, but one of I had a conversation with someone I've been working with for quite some time, and we talked about the this actual video post, the work that I'm doing on this post, and what it is for me, and how it is evolving, and what it's doing for others. That's something that I have been curious to discover more about, because I've known on some level, what it's doing for me, obviously, and I've had a sense on some level of what it's doing for other people. But I also realized at some point that I wasn't super deeply informed about that. I haven't. I've had a fair amount of conversation with a lot of you, and that has resulted in a whole set of insights coming through about what it kind of just means to receive what I'm doing, and the intention behind my own process, which has continued to evolve, but which essentially started with the idea of I'm gonna do a post every day where I connect with spiritual practice, with spiritual practice as the central kind of feature of my life. It grew out of my recognition that that's the most important, or the most primary orienting dimension or domain of my life. And once I acknowledged that and actually explicitly prioritized that, I realized, oh, isn't it great that when we do that, our other priorities kind of fall in line? That was one of my early takeaways from this whole process, practice, whatever you want to call it, was that when I really became conscious of that fact, that if I acknowledge what's most deeply important to me and then I prioritize it, everything else takes care of itself. That doesn't mean there's not work to do on those levels. It doesn't mean that there's not a lot of work to do, or that there won't be struggles on other levels. But it locks into place a sense of fundamental orientation. It locks me onto a track where the track is going where I want to go, and which gives every other aspect of my life a sense of being freely chosen. It takes away the notion, which I think sometimes can befall all of us, that there are aspects of our life that we're not choosing. Which you do enough of this work, right? And we do enough of we sort of steep ourselves in the insights and the realizations that come with doing meditative practice and spiritual practice, whatever which may be any number of a million different actual things. But as we do that, we get the sense, we keep ingraining the realization that everything is happening for us. The world is happening for us. What if we can approach every day that way? What if we can approach every minute that way? But we might still feel occasionally like there are aspects of what we're going through that we haven't chosen. And that's, there's something destabilizing about that. It's interesting because having just been spending some time reading Sadhguru's book Karma, he essentially what he outlines as the goal of the book is not to give anyone an exhaustive or comprehensive understanding of karma, nor to really provoke any specific kind of behavior, because he acknowledges different people come to Earth in different lifetimes with completely different goals. You can learn about managing your karma in the context of being someone who's essentially here on Earth to focus on spiritual realization. You can also gain an understanding of karma and employ it in service of a lifetime where our primary outcome is some sort of worldly ambition. All of that is the mechanism and the understanding of the kind of cosmic mechanism, the cosmic fabric, isn't only useful if we want to be yogis and meditate 12 hours a day. That's not the purpose. And so again, kind of like coming back to where I'm coming from with all this, it's like I'm realizing for myself, and I did realize at the beginning of all this, when I put this at the center, I feel like I can choose my life. And that's what Sadhguru also ultimately says this is all about. It's about being in the driver's seat of life, so that where we're going is where we have chosen to go. That's the center of it. And what I feel like I've learned is that's an ongoing choice, because I choose this one day, and then the next, literally the next day or the next moment, a new challenge arises, right? We're always leaning over the edge of our own experience into the moment, the next moment of unknown, and trying to figure out, well, what is that? Now what? It's like, I mean, that was my experience on the MacGyver project that I just got back from. There were these successive layers of challenge, and where I started and what I kind of thought at the beginning of the process, just where my psyche was at the beginning of the process, I was kind of operating on one layer, and it was the appropriate layer. I had to be really focused on the minutia of the arrangements, what was on the printed page that was going to go out to the musicians and the singers, and to some degree the script, but because I was on the musical side for this production primarily, that was my focus. And then I had to be really focused on the instrumental sounds and what was the band really doing. And then little by little, so those minutia formed tiers of progress, all the way through to where I got to by the end, which is running the show top to bottom was just easy. It was like a show up and play the whole thing. No worries, no fear that anything was going to go wrong. It was just, I really got to the place where the sum total of the thing felt totally in command. And so of course that type of a process comes with a certain amount of imprinting. It's like I've climbed a ladder, and at each step where I would show up in the morning and say, I basically, my mantra to myself was, I surrender to the higher purpose that is being worked out through this project and this process. And my heart kind of remained in a place of, or I, where I set my intention on keeping my heart in a place of healing, making the work to be done in the room, in the moment, about the healing of the people involved. And but that massively evolved. That changed dramatically from the first week to the next week to the next week. Each step of the way, it actually would be an interesting exercise for me to go through and sort of reflect on how that changed. I won't bore you with the details, or if I do, I'll make sure that you signed up for it. But there's a successive not knowing, in that. There's a successive series of challenges. And so how we show up and how we lean into the next moment is kind of everything. And feeling like we chose this, feeling like I'm here because I chose this, is so important. Because in the moment that we feel like we haven't chosen something, that's the moment when we can get into the delusional thought, I didn't choose this, this isn't right, I'm off track, I'm whatever it is. And the funny thing is, that can literally never be the case. We can't be off track in our life. We can be not conscious of the purpose for which we're here, or we can be not aligned with that purpose. But there's no such thing as actually being off track, because it's all a hall of mirrors, right? Anywhere we look, we're going to be getting a reflection that says that gives us a correction. It gives us that nudge towards the thing where we actually deeply want to be putting our focus. And so for me, that was realizing spiritual practice is the core. And then very quickly after that, it was like, oh, spiritual practice takes what forms for me, right? And some of the primary forms that it has taken for me and that it continues to take is creative work. Creative work is a spiritual practice if we think of it in a certain way. I had a lesson with Madeline yesterday, and I was just being completely, it was like being bathed in the realization that music is a spiritual practice for me, and just how deeply moved I am by that, and how deeply moved I am by music as a force, as an energy in my life, and how committed I am to it. So, that's where I'm kind of landing today, and that's where I'm finding I'm finding a foothold in this kind of like, it's not a paradox. It's more of it kind of is a paradox, but it's like two things happening at the same time. On one level, there's this practice happening for me. This post and the work that I'm doing is a sharing of me on the deepest level, or it's at least an attempt to do that. And then also I'm looking at, well, when my intention comes in, how can I continue to, you know, to become more conscious of what this is? Because it's always changing and it may always be expanding. There may be some ways in which I shift what I'm doing in order to more fully encapsulate the highest thing for me at a given time. Yeah, I mean, I think what came out of this conversation today that I found so deeply valuable was the simple realization that what I'm doing on this post is share as my true self, share truly what's with no facade, and to really lean into the vulnerability that provokes. And I think it's something, if I look at the last year and change of doing this post, I'm also sort of, it's amazing to me how vulnerable I felt at the beginning and how I would have thought at the beginning, oh, this experience would be really scary, or revealing X about myself, or revealing X about my family, you know, would be really, that would make me, it would make me feel so vulnerable. And now it's become something where the vulnerability is the same. I'm just as vulnerable, but I'm comfortable being vulnerable. So the vulnerability doesn't provoke a need for security. It's not a feeling of vulnerability like, oh my God, something might happen, something bad might happen. It's vulnerability that's like, this is true. It's affecting me. I'm affected in this way. I'm being seen, being affected by something in this way. And there's immediately a kind of like feedback loop that happens where it's like, I know that you know that I know that you know that I'm being affected. And it's like an intensification of consciousness around something that's just deeply true for me, or something that I'm allowing to emerge. And but that feeling of confidence, that feeling that I can sit with that and not just accept that, but relish that. I can relish my own vulnerability. That's a huge gift. That's a huge step, and it makes me sort of, it tells me there's progress happening because I remember what it felt like to not feel that way. So that's a beautiful thing, and it feels like it's one of the real gifts that in a lot of ways you have given me, and that this practice has just allowed me to experience. So thank you. This is a long one. Thanks for watching. I'm going to be unpacking this over the next few days, so I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Love you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.